moved through the shadows of the luxury transport ship like a ghost. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but her hands stayed steady. She had trained for this moment for months. Every corridor, every security camera, every guard rotation was burned into her memory. The stellar crown was beautiful. Gold trim lined the walls and soft lights made everything glow. Rich people traveled on ships like this. Diplomats, politicians, people who made decisions while others died. Pressed herself against the wall as footsteps echoed down the hallway. A security guard walked past, his alien features twisted in boredom. The hegemony employed all kinds of species, but they all shared one thing. They hated humans. Her people were dying. Every day, more bodies filled the mass graves on New Terran. The hegemony forces had surrounded her home world 3 months ago. They cut off supply lines, blocked communication, and slowly squeezed the life out of 2 million colonists. Had watched children starve. She had held dying soldiers in her arms. She had buried her own sister under the burning red sky of New Terran, all because the aliens feared what humans might become. The guard disappeared around a corner, moved again, her soft boots silent on the metal floor. She reached into her jacket and felt the cold weight of her weapon. She hoped she would not need it, but hope was a luxury she could not afford. Ambassador was in Suite 47A, had studied his files until she could recite them from memory. Born on Earth, educated at the finest schools, trained in 17 alien languages. He was humanity's best diplomat, sent to negotiate peace treaties and trade agreements. He was also the only person who knew the encryption codes for New Terran's defense grid. Found the suite door. Her fingers trembled as she entered the override code her contact had provided. The lock clicked open with a soft sound. She slipped inside. The room was larger than her entire apartment back home. Soft music played from hidden speakers. A table held exotic fruits and expensive wine. Through the wide windows, stars drifted past like scattered diamonds. "You are either very brave or very stupid." Spun around. Sat in a chair near the window, a glass of wine in his hand. He was younger than she expected, maybe 40 years old, with kind eyes and silver streaks in his black hair. "I was wondering when someone would come," he said quietly. "The hegemony has been very careful to keep me isolated. No communications with Earth, no updates from the colonies, but news has a way of traveling even in space." Kept her weapon lowered but ready. "Ambassador, I need you to listen carefully. You are from New Terran." It was not a question. Set down his wine and stood slowly, his hands visible. "Your accent gives you away. Southern continent near the mining regions." "My name is Commander, Colonial Defense Force." Her voice was steady, professional. "I am placing you under arrest." Raised an eyebrow. "On what charges?" "Treason against humanity. Conspiracy to commit genocide, failure to provide aid to human colonies under attack." The words felt strange in her mouth. She had practiced them, but they still sounded hollow. "I see." Walked to the window and looked out at the stars. "And what exactly do you want from me, Commander?" "The encryption codes for New Terran's defense grid. Your diplomatic ship has quantum communication arrays. You can send the codes directly to the planet." "Even if I had such codes, which I am not confirming, why would I help someone who has just arrested me?" Stepped closer, her weapon now pointed at the floor. "Because 2 million people are going to die if you do not. Because they are killing children. Because they are trying to wipe us out, and you are the only person who can help." Turned to face her. His expression was sad but not surprised. "You think I have been sitting here drinking wine while humans die? I think you have been negotiating with monsters while my people starve. And you think taking me hostage will solve anything?" Met his eyes. "I think it is the only option I have left." Was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, the stars continued their silent dance. Finally, he spoke. "Show me your authorization for this mission." felt her chest tighten. "I do not have authorization." "You went rogue." "I did what needed to be done." "How did you get aboard my ship?" Hesitated. "I had help. Someone in the hegemony fleet gave me access codes and a false identity." Nodded slowly. "Someone who wants this peace process to fail. Someone who benefits from continued war between humans and the hegemony." "Does it matter? My people are dying right now." "It matters very much, Commander." Walked to a desk and activated a small device. Images appeared in the air above it. Star charts, ship movements, communication logs. "I have been negotiating, yes, but not surrender. I have been trying to arrange a prisoner exchange. 300 human civilians for safe passage of medical supplies to New Terran." Stared at the floating images. The data showed hegemony ships moving away from New Terran, creating a corridor for supply vessels. "The negotiations were scheduled to conclude tomorrow," said. "One day, Commander. You were 1 day away from getting help for your people." Felt the weapon slip from her fingers. It clattered on the floor. "I did not know." "Of course you did not know. Someone made sure you did not know. Someone wanted you to come here and destroy the only chance your people had." A new sound filled the room. Warning alarms, distant but growing closer. Red lights flashed outside the window as hegemony patrol ships changed course toward the stellar crown. Grab's arm. "We need to leave now." "What is happening?" "Someone just broadcast our location to every hegemony warship in the sector. They are coming to kill us both." Picked up her weapon and looked at. "Why would they kill you? You are trying to help them." Was already moving toward the door. "Because peace is not profitable for everyone, Commander, and because someone just made it look like I helped you take over my ship." The alarms grew louder. Through the window could see bright flashes of weapons fire as hegemony ships approached. They had minutes, maybe less. "Where can we go?" she asked. Smiled grimly as he activated the door controls. "We are going to steal my own ship, Commander. I hope you know how to fly." Followed him into the corridor, her mind racing. Everything had gone wrong, but maybe, just maybe, they could still save her people, if they could survive the next hour. The hunt was about to begin. Ran beside through the shaking corridors of the stellar crown. The ship groaned and shuddered as enemy weapons struck the hull. Lights flickered on and off, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "This way," shouted over the noise. He led her toward the ship's center, where the bridge and escape systems were located. "We need to reach the command deck before they cut through the main doors." A massive impact threw them both against the wall, tasted blood in her mouth and felt a sharp pain in her shoulder. "How long do we have?" "Not long enough," helped her to her feet. "The hegemony ships are military grade. This is a diplomatic vessel. We have shields but no real weapons." They reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Stopped and pressed his hand against a hidden panel. The wall slid open to reveal a narrow maintenance shaft. "Emergency route to the bridge," he explained. "Only the captain and senior diplomats know about it." Crawled into the shaft behind him. The space was barely wide enough for a person, and the metal was hot against her hands. "Why are you helping me? I came here to kidnap you." "Because someone set us both up," called back. "And because your people really are dying while we crawl through this tube." They emerged onto the bridge just as another explosion rocked the ship. The main showed 3 hegemony warships closing in, their weapons charging for another strike. The bridge crew was gone, probably evacuated when the attack began. Slid into the captain's chair, and his fingers flew over the control panel. "I am locking down all external communications and taking manual control of the ship." "Can we outrun them?" "No, but we might be able to outmaneuver them long enough to reach that." Pointed at where a small dot appeared among the stars. "Unknown planet about 2 hours away at maximum speed. If we can reach its gravity well, the warships will have trouble following us." Moved to the weapons station. The controls were alien but logical. These are not military weapons. Defensive only. Mining lasers, debris clearance systems, emergency flares. Hands moved over the navigation controls, but they might buy us some time. The ship lurched as changed course toward the distant planet. The hegemony vessels immediately adjusted their approach, trying to cut off their escape route. They are faster than us, observed, watching the tactical display. Yes, but they think I am still a peaceful diplomat. They are not expecting this. Activated the ship's mining laser and aimed it at the nearest warship. The beam struck their shields, causing no damage but forcing them to adjust course. Found herself smiling despite their situation. You are full of surprises, Ambassador. Diplomacy is not always about sitting in comfortable rooms, Commander. Sometimes you have to improvise. For the next hour, they played a deadly game of tag among the stars, used every trick he knew about ship handling, while managed the defensive systems with the skill of a veteran soldier. They could not win, but they could delay the inevitable. Gravity well detected, the ship's computer announced. Planet approach in 15 minutes. Looked at the sensors. That planet, there is something wrong with it. The readings showed a world covered in dense atmosphere and strange energy patterns. No cities, no signs of civilization, but definitely something alive. It does not matter, said grimly. We are running out of options. The nearest hegemony ship fired a full spread of missiles. Threw the stellar crown into a spinning dive, but there were too many to avoid. 3 missiles struck the engine section, and the ship's power systems began to fail. We are losing propulsion, reported. Life support is failing too. Emergency landing it is. Struggled with the controls as the planet's gravity took hold of them. Get to the emergency shelter in Section C, we are going down hard. What about you? Someone has to fly this thing until the last second. Go. Hesitated for a moment, then ran toward the emergency shelter. She could hear on the communication system, broadcasting a distress signal even though nobody would hear it. The emergency shelter was a small room with crash couches and emergency supplies. Strapped herself in just as the ship hit the planet's atmosphere. The hull began to glow and shake as they plunged through thick, toxic clouds. His voice came over the intercom. The landing is going to be rough. The planet's atmosphere is eating our hull. Whatever is down there, it does not like visitors. The ship spun wildly as fought to control their descent. Could hear metal tearing and systems exploding throughout the vessel. Through a small window, she caught glimpses of an alien landscape rushing up to meet them. The impact was like being hit by a giant hammer. His world went black for several seconds. When consciousness returned, she was hanging upside down in her crash couch, blood running down her face. She called out, but there was no answer. Freed herself from the restraints and dropped to what was now the floor. The emergency shelter had held together, but she could hear the hiss of escaping atmosphere. She grabbed an emergency breathing mask and headed for the door. The corridor beyond was a twisted wreck of metal and sparking cables. Emergency lights cast everything in red, making it look like the inside of a dying animal. Followed the sound of groaning metal toward what she hoped was the bridge. She found trapped under a fallen beam, conscious but badly hurt. Blood covered his face, and his left arm was bent at a wrong angle. He whispered as she knelt beside him, "You made it." We both made it. She examined the beam that pinned him down. It was heavy, but she might be able to move it. Hold still. With a grunt of effort, lifted the beam enough for it to crawl free. He cried out in pain but managed to move away from the wreckage. "Can you walk?" she asked. "I think so," leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "But look at this." He pointed to a hole in the hull where she could see outside. The ground beyond was moving, not like an earthquake but like something alive. The soil rippled and shifted, and strange plants swayed even though there was no wind. "The ship is dissolving," said quietly. "Look at the metal around that hole." Looked closer and saw that the edges of the hull were corroding, eaten away by something in the air or ground. As she watched, the hole grew slightly larger. "We cannot stay here," she realized. "No, and I do not think this planet wants us to stay anyway." Help to his feet. They gathered what supplies they could carry from the emergency stores: food, water, medical kit, basic tools, and breathing masks. The ship groaned around them, settling deeper into the alien soil. As they prepared to step outside, Kaut's arm. "Whatever happens out there, we stick together. We may not trust each other yet, but we are all we have." Nodded together. They stepped through the hole in the hull onto the surface of a world that immediately tried to kill them. The ground beneath their feet squirmed and pulled, trying to drag them down. The air burned their exposed skin, even through their protective gear. Behind them, the stellar crown sank slowly into the hostile earth, like a ship disappearing beneath dark water. Their only shelter was being consumed by a planet that wanted them gone. Looked at, saw the determination in his eyes despite his injuries, and felt something she had not experienced in months. Hope. They were alive, they were together, and they were human. That would have to be enough. The first thing learned about the planet was that it hated them. The ground under their feet moved like a living thing, trying to push them away from the crash site. Each step was a struggle as the soil rippled and shifted, making them stumble. The air itself seemed thick and angry, pressing against their breathing masks with unusual force. "Stay close to me," said, his voice muffled by the mask. His injured arm hung in a makeshift sling, but he carried his share of their supplies without complaint. Looked back at what remained of the stellar crown. Already, half the ship had sunk into the ground. The metal hull was covered in a strange green substance that ate through it like acid. How long before it is completely gone? Maybe a day, 2 at most. Adjusted his pack and pointed toward a cluster of tall, dark trees about a kilometer away. "We need shelter before nightfall." They began walking across the hostile landscape. Every plant they passed seemed to react to their presence. Flowers closed their petals and released clouds of yellow spores that made their eyes water. Grass-like plants curled away from their feet, leaving brown patches in their wake. "It is like the whole planet knows we do not belong here," said, watching a bush literally uproot itself and move away from them. "Maybe it does." Stopped to rest, breathing hard. His face was pale under the mask and could see blood seeping through the bandage on his forehead. Some worlds develop collective intelligence. Usually it takes millions of years, but it is possible. A low rumble came from beneath their feet. The ground ahead of them bulged upward, forming a small hill that had not been there moments before. As they watched, the hill split open to reveal rows of thorn-covered vines that reached toward them like fingers. "Definitely intelligent," muttered. She pulled to the left, away from the grasping plants. "And definitely hostile." They changed direction 3 more times as the planet tried to block their path. Each time, new obstacles appeared. Sudden sinkholes, walls of thorns, clouds of toxic gas that rose from cracks in the earth. It was like playing a game where the rules changed every few minutes. By the time they reached the trees, both humans were exhausted. The shoulder throbbed where she had hit the wall during the ship attack and was moving slower with each step. "We need to find water," said, leaning against a tree trunk. The bark immediately began to ooze a dark liquid that smelled like rotten eggs. He jerked away quickly. Opened their emergency kit and checked their supplies. "We have enough water for 3 days, maybe 4 if we are careful, food for a week. And then we find a way to survive on local resources, or we die." Looked around at the alien forest. The trees were twisted and dark, with leaves that glowed faintly in the dim light. Strange sounds echoed from the shadows between the trunks. Nothing looked edible or safe. "There has to be water somewhere," he said. "This much plant life needs a water source." pulled out a small scanner from their supplies. The device beeped and showed a reading pointing deeper into the forest. 2 kilometers that way. But look at this. She showed him the scanner display. The water source was moving. A river or stream, said hopefully. Or something else, closed the scanner and shouldered her pack. Only one way to find out. They pushed deeper into the forest as the alien sun began to set. The trees grew closer together, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out most of the light. Strange creatures rustled in the shadows, but none showed themselves. The ground here was softer but no less hostile. With each step, felt things squirming under the surface. Roots tried to tangle around their ankles. Patches of fungus released spores that made them dizzy. Said quietly, "Stop moving." She froze and followed his gaze. Ahead of them, the forest had gone completely silent. Not a sound, not even the rustle of leaves. The plants around them had turned toward them, as if every tree and bush was watching. "Back away slowly," whispered. They took one step backward, then another. The watching plants followed their movement, turning like living security cameras. Felt sweat running down her back despite the cool air. A new sound filled the silence. A deep, rhythmic pulsing like a giant heartbeat. It came from everywhere at once, from the ground, from the trees, from the air itself. The planet is talking, realized. Not to us, about us. The heartbeat sound grew faster, more urgent. The trees began to sway even though there was no wind. Flowers opened and closed in patterns that looked almost like signals. "Grab's good arm. We need to move now." They ran through the hostile forest as the planet's anger grew around them. Branches reached out to scratch their faces. Roots rose from the ground to trip them. The very air seemed to thicken, making it hard to breathe. Behind them, could hear the sound of trees uprooting themselves, following them through the forest like a slow-moving army. They burst out of the tree line and found themselves at the edge of a wide clearing. In the center was a pool of clear water, perfectly round and still as glass. No plants grew near it. No sounds came from its depths. "It looks too perfect," said, breathing hard. "Agreed, but we need water and this is what we have." Knelt at the water's edge and used their test kit to check for toxins. It reads as pure. No harmful chemicals, no dangerous organisms. Looked back at the forest. The trees had stopped at the edge of the clearing, forming a perfect circle around the water. They swayed gently, as if waiting for something. "They are not following us anymore," she observed. Maybe because they do not need to. Filled their water bottles slowly, watching the surface for any signs of danger. Maybe this place is a trap. Walked around the pool, studying the ground. Unlike the rest of the planet, the earth here was normal. No moving soil, no hostile plants, no strange reactions to their presence. What if it is not a trap? What if it is something else? Like what? Knelt and put her hand on the ground. It felt warm and somehow familiar. What if it is a test? What if the planet is trying to understand us? As if responding to her words, the water in the pool began to glow with a soft blue light. Images formed in its depths. Saw her home world, New Terran, with its red sky and struggling colonies. She saw the war, the death, the children who had no food. Gasped beside her, "How is it showing us this?" More images appeared. Saw herself as a child, playing in the gardens of New Terran before the war. She saw her sister, alive and laughing. She saw the moment when everything changed, when the hegemony ships arrived and the killing began. Then the images changed. Saw in a conference room, arguing with alien diplomats. She saw him working late into the night, searching for ways to help human colonies. She saw him sending secret messages to medical supply ships, trying to get help to dying worlds. "You were really trying to help," said softly. Was staring at his own memories in the water. He saw as a young officer, bright and eager to serve. He saw her watching her world slowly die, saw her sister's funeral, saw the moment when hope turned to desperation. "And you were really trying to save your people," he replied. The water grew brighter and new images formed. Saw herself and working together, their hands joined as they built something new. She saw them standing before a council of many species, human and alien together. She saw peace. The images faded, leaving the pool dark and still once more, and looked at each other across the water, understanding passing between them for the first time. "The planet is reading our memories," said. "It wants to know who we are." Stood and looked around the clearing. The hostile sounds from the forest had stopped. Even the wind had stilled, as if the entire world was holding its breath. "Then let us show it," she said. "Let us show it what humans can do when we work together." As if the planet heard her words, the ground beneath their feet pulsed once with that deep heartbeat sound. But this time, it did not sound angry. It sounded curious. Woke to the sound of talking quietly to himself. She opened her eyes and saw him kneeling by the pool, his good hand moving in slow patterns above the water's surface. The liquid glowed faintly in response to his movements. "How long have you been awake?" she asked, sitting up from their makeshift camp. "A few hours. I could not sleep. Did not look away from the water. I think it is trying to communicate with us." She joined him at the water's edge. The pool had changed during the night. Instead of the clear, still surface they had found yesterday, the water now moved in slow spirals and patterns. Lights pulsed beneath the surface like thoughts trying to form words. "What have you learned?" Showed her a series of hand gestures he had been making. When he moved his fingers in a certain way, the water responded with specific light patterns. Basic communication, simple concepts. Yes, no, safe, danger. Tried copying his movements. The water flickered, then responded with a new pattern she had not seen before. "It knows the difference between us." More than that, watch this. Placed both hands flat on the ground beside the pool. Immediately, the grass around them began to grow, creating a soft cushion. "It can help us if it chooses to, but only when we ask properly." Looked around their campsite. During the night, fruit-bearing vines had grown nearby, and a small stream of fresh water now flowed from the rocks. The planet was taking care of them. "Why now? Yesterday it was trying to kill us." "I think it was afraid. Something terrible happened here before, and it learned to protect itself by rejecting all foreign life." Gestured to the pool, and images began forming in the water again. Saw a world covered in lush forests and crystal cities. Beautiful creatures flew through clean skies. Rivers ran clear and blue between rolling hills. It looked like paradise. Then the images changed. Strange ships appeared in the sky, angular and dark. The beings that emerged from them were unlike anything had ever seen. They looked like walking nightmares, all teeth and claws and hungry eyes. "Parasites," whispered. "They consumed everything. Plants, animals, even the minerals in the ground. They turned this beautiful world into a wasteland." The water showed the planet's desperate fight for survival. The ground itself rose up against the invaders. Plants became weapons. The very air turned toxic to the creatures that were destroying everything. But it was too late. Most of the world's life was already gone. "The planet survived," said, watching the images. "But it was traumatized. It learned that strangers meant death. So it made itself hostile to anything that did not belong. For thousands of years it has been alone, afraid, and angry." Looked up from the pool. "Until we came." Stood and walked to the edge of the clearing. The forest that had chased them yesterday now stood quietly, waiting. She could feel the planet's attention on her, curious but still wary. "How do we help something that big?" she asked. "How do you heal an entire world?" Joined her, his injured arm supported by a sling they had made from emergency supplies. "The same way you heal any trauma survivor. You show them that not everyone is a threat. You prove that some strangers can be trusted." Thought about her own experiences with trauma. The war had left scars on her mind that still hurt. She understood the need to protect yourself, even when protection became a prison. "We need to show it who we really are," she said. "Not just memories, our actions." They spent the morning working together to improve their camp, used her military training to build a proper shelter from fallen branches and emergency supplies, applied his knowledge of alien psychology to create symbols and patterns that the planet could understand. Everything they did slowly and openly. They explained their actions to the water, which glowed and pulsed in response. When they needed something, they asked politely. When the planet helped them, they expressed gratitude. By afternoon, the hostile landscape around them had transformed. The grass was soft and green. Flowers bloomed in patterns that matched the light shows in the pool. Even the air smelled cleaner, less toxic. "It is learning to trust us," observed, "but there is still something blocking complete communication." Knelt by the pool and placed her hands in the warm water. Immediately, images flooded her mind. She saw the parasites again, but this time from the planet's perspective. She felt its pain as forests died, its rage as cities fell, its desperation as life itself was consumed. But she also felt something else: loneliness. For thousands of years, the planet had been completely alone. No other intelligence to talk to, no companions to share its thoughts with, just endless, empty time. "It is not just afraid," said, pulling her hands from the water. "It is lonely. It wants to connect but does not remember how." Nodded thoughtfully. In diplomatic situations, loneliness often manifests as aggression. The desire for connection wars with the fear of being hurt again. Looked at her companion with new understanding. "Is that what happened to us? The war, I mean. Were humans and the hegemony just two lonely species who forgot how to trust?" "Maybe. Fear makes everyone stupid. It makes us see enemies where we might find friends." As if responding to their conversation, the pool began showing new images. Saw human colonies reaching out to alien worlds, offering trade and friendship. She saw hegemony fleets that had originally been explorers, not conquerors. She saw the misunderstandings and accidents that had escalated into war. "So much waste," said sadly. "So many deaths because no one knew how to talk to each other." Felt anger rising in her chest, but not at or the hegemony, at the stupidity of it all, at the leaders who chose war over patience, at herself for believing that violence was the only answer. "My sister died believing that aliens were monsters," she said. "But she was wrong, was not she? They are just afraid like everyone else." Put his good hand on her shoulder. "Your sister died protecting something she loved. That was not wrong. Sometimes fighting is necessary, but it should never be the first choice." The water in the pool began to glow brighter. New images formed, but these were different. Saw herself and not as they were, but as they could be. Ambassadors between worlds, bridge builders, healers of old wounds. "It is showing us a possible future," said with wonder. "A future where humans and aliens work together. But first we need to finish what we started here." Stood and faced the forest. "We need to help this world remember how to trust." As if accepting her challenge, the trees at the edge of the clearing began to move. But instead of approaching with hostility, they moved slowly, carefully, like shy children wanting to join a game but not sure they were welcome. Walked toward the nearest tree, her hands open and empty. The tree's branches swayed nervously, but it did not move away. When she reached it, she placed her palm gently against the bark. Immediately, she felt the planet's consciousness flow through her. Not just images this time, but emotions. Fear, yes, but also hope, curiosity, the desperate desire to trust again. Joined her, placing his hand on another tree. "Can you feel it?" "Yes, it wants to believe we are different, but it needs proof." Closed her eyes and let her memories flow through the connection. She showed the planet her love for her sister, her grief at the deaths of innocent people, her determination to protect those who could not protect themselves. But she also showed her growth, her understanding that enemies could become allies, her willingness to trust even when trust seemed impossible. Shared his own experiences. Years of patient diplomacy, countless hours spent learning alien languages and customs, the joy of breakthrough moments when understanding finally bloomed between different species. The forest around them began to sing. It was not a human sound or anything like music new. It was the voice of living wood and growing leaves, of roots deep in rich earth and branches reaching toward distant stars. It was the sound of a world remembering how to hope. When the song ended, opened her eyes to find the clearing transformed once again. The hostile landscape was gone, replaced by a garden more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. Flowers in impossible colors bloomed around crystal pools. Trees heavy with fruit offered their bounty freely. "It trusts us," said with amazement. Looked at the man who had been her enemy just days before, "and we trust each other." Smiled and extended his good hand. "Partners." Shook his hand firmly. "Partners, now let us see if we can get off this world and prevent a war." The pool behind them pulsed with warm light, and had the distinct feeling that the planet was smiling. The rescue ships arrived 3 weeks later, and were not ready to leave. They stood in the heart of what had once been a hostile world, surrounded by gardens that glowed with their own inner light. The planet that had tried to kill them now sang gentle songs when they walked its paths. Crystal formations had grown overnight, creating living architecture that responded to their thoughts and needs. "Are you certain about this?" asked, watching the approaching vessels on their repaired scanner. 3 hegemony warships and 1 human diplomatic vessel flying in formation. The sight should have terrified her, but she felt only calm anticipation. Adjusted the communication device they had built with the planet's help. It was unlike any technology either of them had seen before, grown rather than manufactured, alive rather than mechanical. "As certain as I can be, the planet agrees to act as neutral ground. The hegemony representatives have agreed to attend. Your colonial leaders are sending their best negotiators. And if it goes wrong, then we will have tried something that has never been attempted before, a peace conference hosted by a living world, with nature itself as witness to whatever agreements we make." Smiled at her concern. "We have already succeeded. Look around you." Did look around, and marveled again at what they had accomplished. The pool where they had first communicated with the planet was now a vast lake, its waters clear enough to reflect the strange double suns that had emerged when the world shed its toxic atmosphere. Fish swam in its depths, creatures that had been hiding for thousands of years, waiting for the planet to feel safe enough to let them live again. The forest had grown into a magnificent city of living trees, with pathways of soft grass and homes carved from willing wood. The planet had become an artist, creating beauty wherever humans walked. It was as if the world was trying to show them everything wonderful it could be, if only it was not afraid. "The first ship is landing," announced, watching the scanner. Felt her stomach tighten with nerves. What if they think we have been captured? What if they try to attack? "Then the planet will protect us and we will try again," placed his hand on her shoulder. "But remember what we have learned here. Fear is just pain that has not healed yet. These people, human and alien, they are all carrying wounds from this war. Our job is to help those wounds heal." The first ship to touch down was human, a sleek diplomatic vessel with the colonial defense symbol on its hull. Recognized the design immediately. It was one of the ships that should have been defending New Terran instead of flying to this remote world. "Commander," the voice came from the ship's communication system. "This is Captain, Colonial Defense Force. Please respond if you are able." Picked up the communication device. "Captain, this is Commander. I am unharmed and ready to receive the diplomatic party." "Commander, we are here to extract you from what our intelligence suggests is a hostile situation. Prepare for immediate evacuation." And exchanged glances. This was exactly what they had feared would happen. "Captain, I need you to listen carefully. The situation here is not what you think. We have established communication with a planetary intelligence. This world is offering to host peace negotiations between human and hegemony forces." A long pause. Then, "Commander, have you been compromised? Are you speaking under duress?" Sighed, "Captain, I know how this sounds, but I need you to trust me. Land your ship in the clearing 200 meters north of my position. Come alone and leave your weapons behind." "I cannot do that, Commander." "Then you will miss the chance to save millions of lives." Another pause, longer this time. Could imagine the captain consulting with his superiors, trying to decide if she had gone insane or if this was really the breakthrough they desperately needed. "Very well, Commander, I am coming out, but if this is a trap—" "If this is a trap, Captain, it is the most beautiful one ever created." And walked to the edge of the clearing to wait. Around them, the planet itself seemed to prepare for visitors. Flowers bloomed in patterns of welcome. The grass grew softer and more comfortable. Even the light seemed to become gentler, less alien and more familiar. Captain emerged from his ship wearing full combat armor and carrying a plasma rifle. He was a tall man with gray hair and suspicious eyes, exactly what expected from a colonial defense officer. He walked carefully across the grass, obviously expecting an attack at any moment. "Commander," he stopped 10 meters away, his weapon ready but not quite pointed at them. "You look, well." Stepped forward with her hands open. "I am well, Captain, better than I have been in years. Allow me to introduce Ambassador and our host." She gestured to the pool behind them. As if on cue, the water began to glow with soft, welcoming light. Images formed in its depths, showing Captain scenes from his own life. His family, his service record, his fears for the people he was sworn to protect. Stared at the pool with wide eyes. "What is that?" "That is a planetary consciousness, Captain. A living world that wants to help us end this war." Moved to stand beside. "It has been alone for thousands of years, but it remembers what peace looks like. It wants to help us remember too." More ships were landing around the clearing. Saw hegemony vessels with their distinctive angular designs, and more human diplomatic ships. Representatives from a dozen species emerged slowly, cautiously, ready for battle but finding only beauty. The planet responded to each new arrival with patience and gentleness. For the humans, it showed familiar Earth-like landscapes with golden sunshine and blue skies. For the various hegemony species, it created environments that matched there, with appropriate atmosphere and gravity. "This is impossible," Captain said, lowering his weapon as he watched crystalline spires grow from the ground to shelter the hegemony representatives. "How can a planet do this?" "The same way humans can learn 17 alien languages," replied, smiling at. "The same way we can take enemies hostage and end up saving each other's lives. Life finds a way to surprise us, Captain." Over the next few hours, delegates from both sides of the war gathered in the growing city of living stone and wood. Watched them with a mixture of hope and nervousness. These were the people who held the power to continue the killing or find a path to peace. The hegemony delegates were exactly what she had expected. Proud, suspicious, and still angry about human expansion into their territories. The human representatives were equally suspicious, still mourning their losses and demanding justice for attacks on civilian colonies. But something remarkable happened as they spent time on the planet. The living world itself began to work on them, just as it had worked on and. The beautiful surroundings made anger harder to maintain. The planet's gentle presence made fear seem unnecessary. Found herself standing between Admiral Torres from the Colonial Defense Force and Prime Negotiator Al from the Hegemony Council. Both were veteran warriors who had spent years fighting each other. Now they stood in a garden of impossible beauty, trying to understand what they were experiencing. How do we know this is not some form of mind control? Admiral Torres asked, his hand resting on his sidearm. How do we know this planet is not influencing our thoughts? Because mind control would not feel like this, Al replied, his multiple eyes studying the crystal formations around them. This feels like clarity, like seeing clearly for the first time in years. Approached the group with calm confidence. The planet is not controlling anyone's thoughts. It is simply showing us what we all want: peace, security for our families, an end to senseless death. Easy words, Ambassador, Admiral Torres said, but we have strategic concerns. Human colonies need protection. We cannot simply ignore hegemony aggression. And we cannot ignore human expansion, Al added. Your species reproduces rapidly and consumes resources at alarming rates. Left unchecked, you will overwhelm every system in this sector. Listened to the familiar arguments and felt the old anger trying to rise. But then she remembered her sister and's patient work for peace and the planet's long loneliness. She stepped between the two military leaders. Admiral Prime Negotiator, you are both right. Humans do need protection and we do expand rapidly. But what if those were not problems to solve through war? What if they were opportunities? She gestured to the living city around them. This planet has offered humanity something unprecedented, a living world as an ally. Imagine what we could learn from a consciousness that can reshape matter and energy. Imagine what we could build together. Al's eyes focused on her with new interest. You are suggesting an alliance between the hegemony, humanity, and this planet. I am suggesting something better than an alliance, a partnership. Humans bring adaptability and innovation. The hegemony brings wisdom and established civilization. The planet brings understanding and the ability to heal old wounds. Admiral Torres looked skeptical. And what does humanity get out of this besides pretty gardens? Smiled. We get what we have always wanted, Admiral. A chance to grow without destroying. A chance to explore without conquering. A chance to prove that humans can be more than just another aggressive species. The negotiations continued for days and served as mediators, using their unique bond with the planet to help both sides understand what was possible. The living world provided perfect neutral ground, ensuring that every agreement was witnessed by nature itself. When the treaty was finally signed, it was unlike any document in galactic history. The hegemony agreed to lift their siege of human colonies and establish protected growth zones where humans could expand safely. Humanity agreed to share their technological innovations and accept limits on their expansion rate. Most importantly, both sides agreed to work together in learning from the planetary consciousness. The living world would serve as a refuge for both humans and aliens, a place where different species could study cooperation instead of conflict. Stood beside as the last signatures were added to the treaty. Around them, representatives from dozens of species celebrated the end of a war that had seemed impossible to stop. Do you think it will last? She asked. Smiled, his injured arm finally healed with the planet's help. Nothing lasts forever, but we have given peace a chance to grow. Sometimes that is all you can do. Looked up at the alien stars that no longer seemed threatening. Tomorrow, she would return to New Terran to help rebuild her world. Would go back to Earth to present the treaty to the human government. The planet would continue its patient work of healing the wounds between species. But tonight, for the first time in years, felt hope. Real hope, based not on military strength or diplomatic clever tricks, but on the simple truth that even the deepest wounds could heal if you were patient enough to let them. The planet sang softly around them, its voice now joined by the laughter and conversations of a dozen species learning to be friends instead of enemies. It was, thought, the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. The sound of peace, finally growing in ground that had been prepared by understanding.